and welcome to Extraordinary People in an Ordinary World. I'm your host, Beth, and I'm an ordinary person amazed by the extraordinary people surrounding us. This podcast is about people who live among us who are doing extraordinary things. You can expect to meet people from all walks of life doing things that may inspire you, make you want to change, or just simply sit back and delight in their stories. I have met the most extraordinary people in my ordinary world, and I am so grateful to have the opportunity to share their stories. Now listen in and enjoy. Your inspiration may be right here in this episode. Anyone who has ever hoped for a baby knows the excitement that comes with a positive pregnancy test. It's filled with anticipation and those unforgettable firsts, such as your first OB appointment, sharing the news with your family, and seeing your baby for the first time on an ultrasound. But what happens when that moment doesn't bring reassurance, but instead it delivers unexpected things and life-changing news? Today, we're talking with Miriellys about her family's journey after learning at 16 weeks pregnant that her daughter had a rare genetic condition. We'll explore what it felt like to continue through that pregnancy through uncertainty, how the healthcare practitioners and her family responded to the diagnosis, and how she learned to cope and find strength along the way. This episode is very fitting since it's May and we're celebrating moms. And our guest is an extraordinary mom. So I'd like to welcome Miriellys to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited and nervous at the same time. This is such a wonderful platform to share our story and kind of hope it reaches a mom that's either going through it or has been through it, and hopefully she can get some insight and inspiration from our story.
Well, I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to explain how I actually was introduced to you.
That'd be great.
My friend Jane, who was one of my nursing students way back, you cared for your daughter, correct?
Correct, yes. She's wonderful. We love Jane.
I always ask people to reach out to me if they know somebody extraordinary, and she reached out to me and said, "You have to interview Miriellys. You have to." And I said, I can't wait. So my friend Jane Nickatuck introduced me to you, and I'm so thankful to her for that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of echo some of the things that, because Jane was one of the first people that came to our home when Aerilyn was born around that time, because we were looking for early intervention and she was part of that program. So she means a lot to me because the kindness and the love that she showed us when we first, she was the first person I introduced Aerilyn to. So just that love that she had for us and open arms, because the diagnosis was pretty tough and a lot of people were not very kind to us in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Because one, they just didn't understand why we didn't do the medical logical thing, which was have an abortion for Aerilyn. So meeting people that were open arms and people of faith and people that believe in a higher power, it really helped, in those beginning stages of Aerilyn's life. So I thank Jane for having that heart with me. She's someone I love, and I'm happy she connected us so we can, share that journey.
Yeah, so maybe what we could do now is you can take me back to the pregnancy and what you remember most about the early weeks, and then like what led up to you finding this diagnosis. And you can tell us about the diagnosis also.
Yes, absolutely. Aerilyn is our second baby. We planned for Aerilyn. I remember we were so excited because that was early on when we just became first-time home buyers, and we had our home and we closed at our house in May. So I was so psyched. I was like, oh, great. We have our firstborn, which is my son Elias, who's now 14, a teenager. At that time, he was 2 years old, and we were planning everything. Okay, we planned the home, we planned our pregnancy. Let's plan another pregnancy, which would be Aerilyn, and we were excited, and things were great for the first couple of weeks. Everything was just normal. There was nothing abnormal about the pregnancy. It wasn't until we got into the anatomy scan that's when we found out the diagnosis. And that day was very, one of the biggest days of our lives. It was the day that...
You think you were?
We were about 20.
Okay.
So that day was like, we were excited for that day because we were going into that appointment expecting to get the gender of our child. We're like, okay, she's going to be it's a boy or a girl. And we were excited either way, but we wanted to know. And this way we can prepare again. Everything was about preparation.
Mhm.
And we went in and they were doing the ultrasound, and the technician, in retrospect, I can see that she was taking a very long time to get the images and to basically scan for things and scan for growth and other things. And she during our appointment, she was very talkative until it got halfway, and then she stopped speaking. She got very silent and serious. And we didn't think much of it. We thought it was part of you're in there, you're trying to get as much information as possible, and then, and then we could get our information of our baby, and then we're all happy, ready to go home. And she got up and was like, "Okay, I have to get the doctor. I'll be back." And before she left, we asked her. We said, "Well, can you tell us what we're gonna have? It's a boy or a girl?" And then she came back. She looked on her monitor. She's like, "Oh, it's a girl," and she bolted out of the room. And so that was like a burst of excitement. Like we were ecstatic. I was already planning all the pink things that I was going to buy, and we had the boy, and now we're going to have the girl. So this was just it was euphoric until the doctor walked in. And then when the doctor walked in, the mood of the room changed completely. It got very quiet, and you can see it, the seriousness in her face, that she was about to deliver some news. And she did. She sat down in front of us and she said, "By the images that we're receiving, it looks like your child has a cleft lip." And then she proceeded to talk about some of the issues, genetic issues that come along with abnormalities. And it could be cosmetic, or it could be something more serious. And so at that time, some of our background is that on my father's side, there is a genetic condition called trisomy 13.
Okay.
It was something that we didn't know too much about. We knew that there were some children in our family that carried it, and they didn't live very long. The condition was, there was a high mortality rate with the condition. And that's all I knew about the trisomy. I knew nothing about what it looked like in a genetic map, or what some of the components of it health wise were.
Yeah.
And so my heart sank. I became that part of my life was the darkest part of my life.
So that ultrasound, you knew there was a possibility it was trisomy 13,
Yes, I had the feeling that it was going to be trisomy 13, just
but the doctor
because.
didn't.
I'm sorry?
Did the doctor mention it at that time or no?
No, not at all. You know how they have you fill out the form of genetic issues, and so I did check off that there was a genetic issue in our family. She didn't she didn't automatically go to that, but I mean, one of the markers for trisomy 13 is a cleft lip and palate. And even at that time, I didn't even know that that was a marker for for trisomy, because none of the children on my father's side had a cleft lip and palate.
Okay.
So it was still in the air whether or not, until they said, okay, you would need to go for an emergency amniocentesis to actually get a definitive answer on your child's condition. So, that was heartbreaking.
Yeah, that is heartbreaking.
Yeah. I wanted to share with you, I do have a post that I kind of, around that time, I spoke about that, about the feeling of what that felt like. And I wanted to share that with you. Okay. So this is the day we sat in front of a genetic counselor. The day we sat in front of a genetic counselor after receiving our daughter's diagnosis of trisomy 13 was one of the most epic moments. It marked the first solid memory of our journey, and unbeknownst to us, it put our faith on trial. For most who never experienced something so brutal like a life changing diagnosis, we tend to live self assured, fixated on what we believe is worthy of existing in our lives, assuming our interpretation of all things good are guaranteed. I have a happy life. I'm not one to receive bad news. I don't have to imagine a hard situation. But when you do encounter a hard situation like the devastating and overwhelming grief you feel when your child is given a death sentence incompatible with life, I could only describe that feeling as being ripped from the root of your soul and tossed in a whirlwind of unmerciful pain. Faith and believing in a higher power is now completely lost in the haze of your circumstances. So yeah, that was tough. That was that day we sat in front of a genetic counselor and he really broke it down to us like, okay, your daughter has a genetic condition, not only one, but she has two. She has trisomy 13 and she has monosomy 15, which is a deletion of her 15th chromosome. So one of those two chromosome abnormalities, just one of them could cause a high mortality rate, and she had two. So the odds were stacked against her double.
I
And
thought that read that, if a baby with trisomy 13 is born, they 80% of those babies will pass within the first year.
correct. Yeah, that is correct. When we 2014, they've changed the language quite a bit, and
Okay.
because of medical interventions, the stats have changed. Now they say because of the interventions medically that the chances of life are a little higher than they were. But when we were first diagnosed, she was only given a 2% chance on life and a 10% chance on living the first year. If she did survive birth, then maybe a 10% chance of the first year of life. And so that was almost impossible, agonizing to try to digest that information when you're having a baby. You know, you have this child growing inside of you, and you are being told by people that are the technicians that are doing the ultrasound that don't know about your child's genetic condition, and they tell you, "Oh, she has a strong heartbeat. Look at her flutter through your belly." You know, all these positive and beautiful things, and then you have this conflicting information from the geneticists and the specialists that are telling you, no, I mean, this is not possible, and this is not going to be possible for you. So it was like I said, any parent facing something like that, it just your soul feels like it's being torn in 20 places. It's agonizing. It's completely agonizing. And anytime that I hear about parents going through a diagnosis that is a life-changing diagnosis, my heart goes out to them because it puts me in that very same spot. And that in that day of receiving it's burned into our memory, into our soul. There's not a day that goes by that I don't feel that intensity of receiving a diagnosis.
Yeah. So would you get the diagnosis, you're
Yes.
about 20 weeks or so, you said.
Yes, correct.
Did this, like, speak about options for you, or what was
Correct. Yeah. So when the geneticist gave us the information, he said to us, "Well, you need to make a decision. You only." Because we asked, we're like, "Okay, what do we do?" And he said, "Well, the only option right now is to have an abortion. That's the medical option you can have." And at this moment, we were in Pennsylvania, and they said basically the timeline for Pennsylvania is like we had a week to make that decision. And so he said to us, "Here's the information. Give them a call and set up an appointment because unfortunately, there's nothing else that we could do for you." So I don't know why, after that information that he gave us, we ended up having another ultrasound. And the lady from that ultrasound, because at that point I was like high risk pregnancy.
Mhm.
And so when you're labeled as a high risk pregnancy, they have to monitor you almost weekly on a weekly basis.
Okay.
The first thing she said is, "Oh, this child is so strong. She has such a strong heart." Such a strong heart, and she kept emphasizing how much strength she had in her heartbeat. And I said, "Okay, I didn't think much of it. I was devastated, so a lot of things that were being said to me, I wasn't taking it in. It felt like
Urban
it was
everything.
all muffled, like, you know how when it comes to Charlie Brown and the teacher's talking? Yeah, that's all you heard the first couple of weeks when you're
Mm.
getting something so devastated that way. It's just everything that they're telling you, it just kind of sounds muffled than your devastation.
Right, right.
I went home, my husband, who's incredibly supportive, who's the love of, my life. And he's, from the beginning, we've been together 26, all these decisions we try to make together. And he said, it's how you feel and how, if God is telling us to have this baby, then, maybe it's for that reason. But also because the specialist had framed it in a way that this is your only medical choice for this child is to have an abortion is, then you really start thinking like, is it, is this the only option we have for this baby, because we've never been put in a situation like that where you're basically making the decision for your child's life,
Right.
And
Yes.
yeah, so it was hard. It was so hard. There's no explaining the level of devastation that you feel when you're put in that position. And not only that, but then they're telling you that you have to make the decision, you
Right.
know?
In a short period of time because they're telling you only have so long before it's no longer an option.
Correct. Yeah. They're like, well, this is your time. You have to make this decision. Everything falls in your hands. So I felt like I was playing God. Like, how can you say that to me? Like, how can you make that but I mean, thank God they did. You know what I mean? Like, thank God that at the end of the day, I said to myself after calling and finding out, because I was naive. That was never a situation that my husband and I we planned both of our children. We planned Elias and we planned Aerilyn. So there was nothing, and our faith, even before this, would say, okay, this is an option for us. But when they
Correct.
spin it as a medical option, then things change.
Think of it as a medical procedure, not the termination of a pregnancy.
Correct. It's a medical procedure. And that's how they framed it. And they made us believe that, yeah, it is a medical procedure. Yeah, this is the best thing for our child, like, and so I called, I asked, they told me that the way that they were planning to, I guess the way that they carry out an abortion is they gave you different options and all of them sound horrendous. And I said, is there a humane way to do this? And they were like, no, this is basically your options. And one of them that stood out to me that made me say, no, I'm not doing this, was that she said that she would put a needle through my belly, and put poison in Aerilyn's heart and stop her heart. And then this way they can suction her out. And that took me back 1,000 miles back because I was like, what in the world? I'm like, how is this possible? How is this my reality? Like, how is
Yeah.
it that they're going to stop my child's heart? Just a moment ago, I had the technician tell me that her heart was incredibly strong. And then you're going to have someone pump poison into her to stop
Yeah.
it? So,
Made it more feel now that it wasn't a medical procedure.
correct. Exactly. Now it felt like, okay, I thought medicine was not to harm people. I thought medicine was to, save people, not to harm. And so that really contradicted. That contradiction was what made me feel like, no, we're not doing this. I said, and not only that, but I also, the fear of God, because I said to myself, one day I'm going to go to heaven and I'm going to have to stand in front of God and explain to him, my decisions.
Yes.
And I said to myself, I can't see myself doing that.
Hmm.
Justifying it,
Same. Your
Yeah.
husband same.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex is very good at, you know, being the greatest support and also allowing me, he trusts me more than he trusts himself. So he'll allow me to take all most of if it's something that he feels like, like strongly about, then he'll step in and say no. But him and we were both kind of just floating along on a sinking ship. And he felt exactly how I felt. He said, well, if this is the only option and it seems very contradictory that you're going to take someone's life, then no, let God be the one to have the final say in her life. And that's ultimately what happened.
And or at least that in itself took a lot of guts too. Like, it took a lot of guts to say, "No, we're gonna move forward with this."
Yeah, it really did. It was, not only was it hard, but then they made you feel like you did the wrong decision. There was no support after that from at least a medical, because they just couldn't understand why I would put myself and put this child through an unnecessary birth
Mhm,
when this child is going to face challenges and ultimately die. And so why would I be so selfish? That was the kind of undertone after we made that decision. And so I really had to I really had to hold on to my faith, I did. I mean, there was a lot of anger after we received our diagnosis. I'll read part of some of another post that I had, if that's okay.
yeah, because this way it can bring you right back to that moment when it happened, like
Yeah, yeah, I'll tell you
yeah,
one. Yeah. Okay, so this was roughly after that as well. So I'll read it now.
yes, please.
It says, "For the first time in my life, anger was aimed at the Almighty God. It was hard for me to admit that that is true, but as a human being, as a mother, 6 months of life brewing inside of you, feeling every movement, celebrating the sounds of her heartbeat playing loudly through the speaker of an ultrasound, watching her body suspended in the safety of your womb, now flushed away by the incomprehensible news from a specialist, a professional in the medical field, announcing that I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do for her diagnosis, a condition that will greatly and profoundly impact your child on a level so deep, life is not viable. When faith is removed, you become a stranger to yourself, and rock bottom sinks in fast, as if the devastating news wasn't enough of a parental nightmare. According to the world of medicine, they have an option for a child like mine, a child who's broken, no good, considered a burden. And with all this data in front of you, the logical approach, according to the majority vote, would be to get an abortion. So I had this so called decision of abortion and told with firm confirmation I should consider this to be my only solution. It was then when I felt those were justifiable grounds to be angry at God for allowing this to happen. This was absolute torture. And even though I was in a tough position, the person in the toughest position was my child. She had no participation in choosing to have a rare genetic condition, and now it seemed like she didn't have a choice in her life's course as well. Tough. It was tough.
That
Like
is
I said, I get emotional because it brings me back to those very that very.
that's aside from, like, the medical team saying, "This is the only way to go, this is what we're gonna do," did you get that type of feeling from your family and friends?
It's hard because, and I don't blame anybody. I really don't, because, like I said, this was new territory for everyone.
Mhm.
And especially my family around me, they all kind of felt the same way. Like, what are you going to do? Like, what is this? Like, what are you planning to do? I mean, I have all of my family members, all are believers of Christ. But like I said, when they frame this in a way that it's a medical decision, it kind of takes away the faith, and it puts it in as a medical term. And so they all had a hard time with it as well. They didn't know what to do. They didn't want to give me advice that would put me in a more difficult decision, like
Yeah.
pressure me into having the baby and then feeling that devastation of losing the child. And then also,
Also came from, it's trisomy 13, it's very rare. They didn't know what your life would be like, so they're like, "Do you wanna go into this not knowing anything that's gonna happen?"
yeah, I did have a couple of friends and family that all kept saying to me, think of your son, think of the burden that this will be on your son. Think of the how he would feel if he two things. If he had to live with a child, a sibling with a disability, and two, if something were to happen to her early on, and how he would cope with that. And so
Right.
that was, I didn't even think about that until that was brought up to my attention. Like, think of your child.
I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Calm Creations. If you like relaxing by the warm glow of a candle with the scent that brings back memories, I've got the perfect candle company for you. Calm Creations, based in New Jersey, makes high quality, beautifully scented candles, and 10% of their profits go to benefit nonprofit organizations. Check out their amazing selection at calmcreations.com. And thank you for being a sponsor of Extraordinary People in an Ordinary World.
It felt like everything was against us, you know? It was a hard time to try to find the hope in every corner. Like you're grasping for hope everywhere you would go. And there was not, you know, it was very small. You know, you would get it in strangers, you would get it in, you know, smiles, you would get it in like God would give us little messages here and there, you know, of hope. But you're human and you're a mother, you
Exactly.
know, you're a mother, and we're as happy as our happiest child. And so if you have one child who's suffering, you're suffering too.
You are. You talked about like being angry with God and not really like being mad, and who wouldn't be, right?
Yeah.
Your baby's, going to go through a lot also to you. But how did you get through that? Like, was there a moment that
Yeah,
you were
there really was.
like,
Yeah,
okay,
there was a moment for a long time. It felt like forever, but, you know, it really was probably a couple of weeks of me just being angry and saying to myself, throwing my hands up in the air and like, "Okay, I don't believe anymore. This is it." What and then in reality, then I would turn around and argue, like, "God, why would you allow this to happen?" You know? So if I didn't believe, I was I was kind of like, you know, going back and forth. Yeah, I believe. No, why are you doing this to me? And then, you know, I kept going back. I was teetering the fence, and there was one day where it was the heaviest and I was just almost unconsolable. I was just crying and I kept asking myself, what did I do? Why? Why would I, you know, what did I do to deserve this? And I kept that word, just that question just kept over and over and over. And then I'm sitting there, my phone goes off, and it's a text from my neighbor, and she's asking me. She said, "Hey, I'm going to church tomorrow. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "Fine." You know, I shrugged my shoulders. I said, "I'm defeated as is. There's nothing else I can do at this point. I just might as well just drag myself through this whole process because that's what it felt like. I was just dragging myself through the process." And she picked me up and we ended up going to her church. And when we walked in and I sat down, I looked up at the aisles. I looked towards the pew and the podium. And behind the podium, there was a giant banner, huge banner. And on the banner, it said, "Why?" And at first, I was taken back and I'm like, "Is this a joke? Like, is this like, what is it? What is this? I mean, is this a sick joke? Like, what is going on?" And then, you know, someone came up to speak on the microphone and he asked all the same questions I asked. I said, "Why, God, why would you allow things to happen?" And then they brought up John 9, where one of them asked Jesus, "Why is this man blind? Was it his it was his parents that sinned?" And then he said, you know, "No." I mean, I'm paraphrasing. This is, you know, me
right?
saying, but he turned it back to himself. I wouldn't be able to perform my miracles. And so I was like in total shock. I cried.
So it
But
wasn't
then
for the glory of God to show his
correct.
yeah,
Yes.
that's a
Yeah.
great I can't believe you got that story that day. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and that's what out of all the stories that you can get, you know, out of all the things that you can receive, all the messages you can receive, because there's many messages of strength, there's many messages of turmoil and overcoming obstacles and things like that. The message that I needed the most that day was basically answering my very question. That same question I had a few hours ago, he's presented it in front of me, and basically, I'm not flying under the radar anymore. He's in my face as bold as possible, telling me that this is what this is what this is, you know? You're not gonna understand it, but this is why. And I'm here, and I can see you, and I can hear your prayers, and I can hear your questions." And so I was scared. I
Yeah.
think I was scared back into faith because I'm like, "Oh my goodness."
Right?
Yeah, I was scared back into my faith. I said, "Okay, that's right," like, I'm back in. There's no I'm not gonna, and since, honest to God, since that moment in time, I've never questioned anything. And we've had a lot of difficult moments even after, Aerilyn's birth. But it felt like a flood of healing, it felt lighter. It felt like the burden wasn't as heavy to carry when he came back into my he was always there. It's not that he left, but I stopped to listen, and I stopped making this about myself, because that was basically most of the problem, is that I was focusing too much on myself, focusing too much how I felt, making this about myself and my husband, about the plans that we had already. We made all these plans.
Right.
Yeah. And how, yeah, and so it was difficult. Just to have that confirmation was it. I said, "Okay, I got him on my side. There's nothing that I can't survive without God at this point, because he said he's there. I heard him, you know? And so now that,
Say God doesn't promise you a life of ease, but he promises you in your troubles, he'll be there and carry you through.
amen. Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. He came in and he was bold about it. There was no confusing it. There was no coincidence. It was right in your face. And so I made that commitment. I said, "Okay, we're in this. We got this. We're going to do this. There's nothing else we can do at this point." And if he says that I can, if he's here with me, then we'll get it done. And so I think allowed me to enjoy the rest of my pregnancy. And it allowed me to kind of breathe for once that whole time, because I couldn't breathe. Like the day that they told me that she was diagnosed, I felt like the air came out of my lungs, like all the air out of my lungs that day. And it's funny because Aerilyn's name means beautiful air. And I didn't choose it like that. I mean, I chose it because my mom likes Marilyn Monroe, and it sounded like Marilyn. That's the reason why I chose it, to be honest. But then when I looked into the definition of her name, I was like, "Oh my goodness, yeah, beautiful air." That's, it really is.
Was beautiful.
Yeah, so, it all there's a lot of, like, intertwining moments of beauty in this story, you know? And so I was able to breathe again. I took a deep breath, and I said, "Okay," then I felt like I was more focused. Like, you had the cape on of, like, a warrior. "All right, I'm going in, and we're gonna do this, so we're gonna figure this out step by step." And I was mentally preparing myself for the the first day that I was going to lose my child, like, that's what they said the prognosis would be that she either was not going to be born alive, or if she was, it would only be a few hours. And I had to go in mentally prepared for that, which is
Absolutely.
not easy.
But here we are. You said that was 2014, right?
Correct. Yeah, we had 12 years, 12 solid years. I'm still holding my breath, you know?
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Aerilyn and what she's like today.
Oh my God. Aerilyn is, I'm going to tell you the first day that I met Aerilyn.
Yes.
So when she was born, like I said, they had this idea of she might be like a vegetable. There was, like, she might be stillborn. There a lot of terrible, terrible things that happened during a birth. They presented it to me. So when she came out, she was tiny. She was 4 pounds, and she was sliding right out. And we had everybody in that room because it was a high risk birth. So
Right.
everybody was gowned in blue gowns and masks. And she was born natural. So I remember her just kind of sliding right out. And Elias was very different. Elias was a lot of work. Hers was just very simple. She just came sliding right out. And I even told the nurse, I said, I'm feeling like, my baby's coming. And she's like, no, 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 it can't be. I checked you. You're fine. And I'm like, no, she's coming. And she's like, no, no, no. And it's typical Aerilyn. Aerilyn does not follow any type of procedures. And she does not follow any type of medical law. She just does her own thing. So she did. She came sliding on out. And when they picked her up and they held her up high, she looked dead in my eyes and she blinked and everything was fine. It looked like she looked at me and said, I'm okay. And when I looked at her, I said, she's fine. They
Yeah.
made this, they turned this into such an ugly, terrible thing. And when she came out, she had the opposite reaction. She kind of like, typical baby cried. And her cleft, I have a picture of like this was her mouth.
So
Yeah,
the
she was,
feels that she has a cleft right in the middle.
yeah, yeah. So when she cried, her lips flared out. You can see, yeah. And so she came out like this. And it was, what was that?
Had a lot of surgery then.
She did. She had a couple of months after that because she had to grow. Because that was another thing is that the reason why she came early was because she wasn't really growing in utero. After a point, she stopped growing. So they were planning to have again they wanted to stimulate birth for me. And she chose her day. She was like, no, no, I'm coming the 29th. That's the day I want to come. And again, she rules her own. She makes her own rules. So it was nice. She came on the 29th, and so that was our introduction. I saw her. She saw me. I'm like, okay, this is good. She's good. She's doing good. And then, of course, in NICU, we had a lot of turmoil. There was moments where she did have oxygen problem where her O2 would drop because it was neurologically. So it wasn't anything obstructing her airway. It was just her brain wasn't sending the right signals for her to take deep breaths. So her O2 would drop and she would kind of turn gray. And then, that was another story. That's a whole other journey of being in the NICU and then having people kind of tell you like, well, here she is. Take her home. Like, I'm not a medical professional. How am I supposed to, you guys have her hooked up to monitors and you guys have a feeding pump and and I don't have anything. And again, not much support. Their idea was, well, comfort care, you know, put her on hospice and take her home and then just give her the most comfortable the most comfortable short life that you can give her. And so we came home with no monitors and no type of indication of how she's doing. We were flying blind, literally, for a couple of weeks. And then a couple of weeks turned into months. And then I said, well, you're still here. What am I supposed to do? And they said to me, well, try to find a doctor who's comfortable with her and comfortable with her condition. And so I called and our doctor said, yeah, we'll take her. And they took her in. But every single step in the beginning felt like a battle. It felt like climbing Mount Everest just to get somebody to listen to our plea because they had already labeled her incompatible with life.
Mhm.
They didn't believe in interventions for a child who was labeled in that, with that diagnosis. They really didn't see any effort. There was no effort to try to put in comprehensive care like they do now. Now they have teams of doctors that get together and when your child is born with medically complex, you see a comprehensive pediatrician and then you branch off into all the ologies. Like I say, Aerilyn has 18 different specialists and we see all the ologies, so and they're fantastic.
Theology, all the ologies. Yeah.
All the ologies, we see all of them. And so going back to your question on how she is today, she's doing fantastic. I look at Errol, I was thinking about this yesterday. It's hard to say what my favorite thing about Aerilyn is because everything about her is my favorite. Just the way that she sits, sometimes she sits with her hands folded in a praying position. And I always tell her, I say, Aerilyn, are you praying for us? And she just kind of looks. I was like, okay. She's a beautiful baby. She's a beautiful child. She has fair skin, long eyelashes. Her eyelashes are something that everybody talks about. She has a beautiful kind of like personality where she has many facial expressions. And so she has a following on Instagram, and everybody loves to watch my short videos. Definitely. And it's a public account, and it's Aerilyn in all her sassiness.
Oh,
She's decorated in JoJo bows. She's always fashionably, she has all her dresses and everything to coordinate the bow that she's wearing of the day, the outfit of the day. She's a funny girl. She's just so beautiful. And I'm in awe of her because every single time I look at her, I feel like, wow, there's no one on this planet, not a single human being on this planet that has her genetic composition, her personality, her beauty, and I get to have her and she's all mine, you know? And so it's like, I stare at her like you stare at a sunset. You're just in awe of all the things God can do, all the beautiful things God can do.
she sounds like a beautiful girl, but I know there's a whole team that helps you care for her, right? Because she
Yeah,
does
I know.
needs. So what are some of those needs that she has?
Absolutely. So Aerilyn's considered critical care. So what that means is that she needs a lot of medical interventions for her to be here with us. So she is trach and vented. She has a feeding tube. She is non-mobile and non-verbal. She has seizures every day, and she has a list, and I lost count of all the diagnoses that kind of branch off from when you have a primary diagnosis, like a primary genetic diagnosis. So she has seizures, she's low tone, she is nonverbal, non-mobile. And so because she's so medically complex, we have all the doctors that are assigned to her to help kind of care for her. So on a monthly basis, we could see up to 6 specialists because there's 18 in total. And then if you break it down to seeing every specialist every 3 months, there's some months like last month where we had 5 appointments in one day. And,
Wow.
it gets busy. It's really busy. But everybody on her team are just amazing. She has home nursing. So the 2 nurses, I've been very blessed to have 2 incredible nurses. She had 3, but 1 retired. But I have 2 incredible nurses. I've been with her since she's been a baby, which is rare because if you know anything about home nursing, it's very difficult. Home nursing is one of the most difficult things for a medical parent to have, especially someone that you can rely on and you can, put your head on a pillow and rest.
Yes.
So they love Aerilyn and they take very good care of her. And every single day, Aerilyn's life kind of mimics that of a ICU. We have her room is a mini ICU. She has a ventilator, she has oxygen concentrator, a suction machine, she has a feeding pump, she has a Hoya lift, she has a wheelchair, activity chair. She has a Valera system that helps her with her respiratory treatments. Every morning, my nurse will come in and I give her a report and I tell her, okay, this is how her night was last night. Her heart rate was at this, this is how many seizures she had. If she was having outputs, I'll let them know how many output in and out. And so I give them a report. They take the report and then we start the day with medication. And Aerilyn is on a ton of medication. She's on 50 different meds. A lot of them are supplements. You have supplements, you have respiratory meds, you have seizure meds, you have topical and PRNs that she's on. And so, we start off the day with treatments and medications. She has physical therapy, occupational therapy that come to the house for 45 minutes once every week. And she has her teacher who you met before,
Right.
who comes every single day. She's been with her as well since she was like pre-K, since she started school. So currently right now, Aerilyn is homebound, home instruction, which means that she's doing homeschooling because being in school is one, it puts her at risk for illness. And 2, it's just incredibly difficult to get a child of Aerilyn's weight and height out of the house. prep her for school, like physically now I'm in a season where it's physically more demanding than it has ever been because she's 60 pounds of dead weight.
Yes.
And it's hard, it is very hard, but I wouldn't change it for one bit, I wouldn't change any of it for one bit.
Gonna keep her home with you. You never thought about a long-term care facility or anything like
And
that?
it's funny, till this day, I still get asked if, because there are moments like both of my nurses, unfortunately, had to have shoulder replacement surgery. So each
Mhm.
nurse had to take 6 months. So the time that they were off, I had to be the nurse to cover. So I
Yeah.
was covering up to 4 days without nursing each week. And it's backbreaking, it is backbreaking, it's laborious. Laugh when ICU nurses talk about working 3 12-hour shifts back to back. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I do that in my sleep. Like I'm working nonstop and I'm critical care. So yeah, I take a lot of pride in out nursing a nurse at this point.
I have a
But yeah,
who has a son who has a disability, and she's kept him home, and he's close to 40 years old now, and she's never put him
wow.
in for me there.
God
And
bless. That's
I know
beautiful.
it's a 24.
Yeah, it is a 24 thing. It's nonstop and it is very demanding physically, mentally, emotionally. And they've mentioned it. I mean, they not as much anymore, but in the beginning they used to ask, well, when are you going to stop doing that? And I'm like, stop doing what? And they're like, oh, stop taking care of her, like put her in a facility. And I'm like, what is going on with you people? It's one of those things that I understand what they mean by trying, they don't want me to face the burden, but as a parent, as a mom, you don't I mean, at least I'm very fortunate because I honestly I don't blame anybody that is in a very difficult position and then they have to put their child in a facility. I don't take that away from anybody. There's some cases where it's necessary.
Yes.
And so I don't take that away from anybody. But in my case, I'm very fortunate that my husband is supportive as he is, and he's an incredible father and very present father, and takes a lot of the load when I can't do it. There are days that I can't even get out of bed, and he'll pick up the load for that day, and help me. And so with that type of help, then it's one of those things that it's a team effort. I thank God for him.
Yeah. Let me ask you about your son, because he's 14, so he
Yes,
lives with you, and he has a disabled sister,
correct. Yeah.
and a disabled sister that's cares 24/7. How do you make him feel special and make it all
Yeah. Well, I am very Elias is such a good kid. He is such a beautiful soul. A lot of people try to credit it to Aerilyn, and I'm like, no, no. I knew this kid before Aerilyn came along. He's always been like this. He's always had because they see how empathetic he is, and they see how just how much love he has and how perceptive he is because he's very perceptive. If you change your nail color, he'll tell you. He'll be like, "Wow, you changed your," like he'll see the smallest little details and everything. And even like emotional, like if you're not feeling good, he'll pick up on those type of things. And so a lot of people kind of credit Aerilyn to his, the way that he is. And I'm like, no, no, no. He's always been like that. I mean, has it helped? Yes. It has helped open up the empathy floodgates for everybody, I feel. Not only for my son, but for myself, for my husband, for my family, the family members around us and friends. She dials up the empathy for everybody who I guess in another realm wouldn't have had that help. But yeah,
another gift to the world?
yeah, seriously. And so the way that we try to make things special for him is that I try to be incredibly intentional about spending my time with him. I have nursing, on a good stretch, I'll have nursing Monday through Friday. So my husband and I always pick Thursdays and Fridays to go out to eat, just the three of us. And we go to the movies, we go, and sometimes that's hard because you're not all together. You have to have one child with you and then the other child has to stay home. So that's a hard part of it. But for the most part, we get to give him that one-on-one time. And out of all the things that I can say that I'm proud of, I'm proud of the fact that I'm able to have a really strong relationship with him, that he can come home like he did today to tell me about how hard things were today and how, he's dealing with school and the friends and stuff like that. Like we're able to talk about issues that I know that most parents that have teenagers feel that their teen don't talk to them. So I'm very fortunate that my son does. My son opens up and he tells me things. And
Aerilyn is 12.
Carolyn's 12, correct? Yeah. Yeah. So, we laugh all the time. We joke. Him and I always, like, my husband feels like the third wheel because he's like, what is going on? And we and him are cracking up and we're just laughing and have inside jokes. And so my husband always feels left out. He's like, I don't get it, But so I mean, I'm proud to say that I've been able to, and I think it's also going back to that what people has said to me in the beginning. They were like, she's going to be a burden to him. Think of your son, And so that really having that in the back of my mind has always been like, no, we're not going to do this. Nobody's going to fall behind, And that includes also like our marriage, nobody falls behind. You have to be very intentional with everybody.
It takes a lot of work to keep it all organized and together and to make
Yeah.
sure it all flows the way it does. You make it sound easy, I will tell you that, but I'm sure it's not.
It's one of those things that I myself don't know how I can manage. Like, I myself don't know how we keep it all together, but it all goes back to how God has given me the strength and the ability to do it. Because I sometimes I ask myself, I'm like, how is this possible? Like, how am I able to handle 18 different specialists, 7 different appointments this week, have to do schoolwork for my son, have to make sure that he has his lunch paid, like all these, and I got to pay for the sewage, all these things, car
Yeah,
insurance.
but
Yeah. And so it's
well,
one of those things. Yeah,
I have another question for you.
sure.
What would you say to a mother sitting in the ultrasound room in this type of position? What would you say in that for like that?
Yeah, I would say to them, I would say, you're not, first of all, it's hard. There is no words I can say. There are no words anybody on this planet can say to you that will make you feel better. You have to grieve. You have to grieve because that's where you find the strength. You have to grieve because grieving is what allows you to come to terms and kind of put that armor on and say, okay, it's part of it. It's part of the process. Anytime that a parent comes to me with pain in their heart, I don't sit there and say, well, look at us. We're doing great. You can do great too. No, I tell them, I say, yeah, this is hard. You should cry. You should feel,
That's a good
yeah,
thing that you tell them because sometimes you feel guilty maybe about feeling grief,
yeah.
but it's a loss. It's a loss of having that perfect child that you had expected.
Exactly. There is, like I said, I came in, I was before Aerilyn was born, I was naive. I felt like, yeah, I was guaranteed good things in my life. I was guaranteed happiness. I was guaranteed no struggles. Then for this to happen, and I'm like, how is this? And not only for this to happen, but to happen to my child, where now my child is going to, if she's not suffering, she's going to die. It's like, then things get into perspective like, oh my God, I really don't have control of any of this. I don't have control of my life. I don't have control of my children's life. Like, because
Yeah.
us parents feel like we do have control of our children's life or to some capacity.
They're gonna outlive their children are gonna way outlive them.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
think to yourself, well, that might not happen for me.
Yeah. And so that type of stuff, nobody could sit here and talk me out of it. I really had to grieve that. I have to grieve the fact that I'm going to outlive my child. I have to, and it's a reality. This is not, okay, hypothetical. This is a reality. This is a reality that one day I will have to bury my child, and a reality that this is it. So if I don't grieve, if I don't allow myself to have that deeply profound, painful painful brokenness that I feel, then there's no way that I can find the strength in it, because the strength is in there. It's underneath all that grief. It's just a matter of really feeling it, being honest with yourself, and then saying, okay, what is the next step? What do I do now? Okay, yes, this is a hard situation, but I need to be strong. I need to be strong for my child, because I want to be able to, whether if it's be with my child for 20 minutes after birth, because they only have a because the reality is, I have a lot of parents, trisomy parents, their children, the day that they're born, within hours pass away. And you have to hear their testimonies. Their testimonies are beautiful. They talk about how they're able to see the joy and able to see God in this small little creation. And every single person, it's one of those things that you don't understand it, but every single person that has a situation like this, where they get to meet their baby, they're so incredibly grateful to be in that moment where they get to meet their baby for even those few minutes. And of course, they spend a lifetime of grief, and it changes with time. It doesn't go away. It just changes with time. And it's powerful. So I would tell a parent that is in a situation like that, yeah, go ahead and cry. Yeah, be angry, be upset. That it's not fair. It's hard. It's so hard. And there's no words, but you have to yourself, you have to dig deep at some point. At some point, you have to dig deep and really tell yourself, I'm going to do this for my child, because if they can do it and this is their journey, then you could be there for them. Because I remember that was one of the things I've said to Aerilyn when she was first born. I said to her, you know what? I'm here for you. I'm your cheerleader. I'm here for you. I'm backing you up. Whatever you do, you make the rules. I'm following your lead. And I did. And I remember that day. I did. I followed her lead, because she was the one that was going to determine whether or not how things are going to go. And so I encourage parents to not only to look for God and to strengthen their faith, because he's there, but to also let your child believe in your child. Don't believe in what they say. Believe in your child. Give your child the chance. Let your child lead the way. Because all the things that 80%, I could say like 90% of the things that I've been told throughout Aerilyn's journey, Aerilyn has taken it, crumbled it up into a ball, and tossed it, because she's doing her own thing. And so now, even the doctors, even the specialists, the ICU doctor recently was like, well, that's Aerilyn. And I'm like, this is not comforting. This is not comforting that you don't know what to do, because we had a situation recently where her sodium levels were 195, which is honest. It's high. And it's like, coma, death, and there's a bunch of stuff that goes with it. And she was not following the rules, and he was like, I don't know. We'll just have to let Aerilyn do Aerilyn. And she did. She once again, she overcame her situation, and she pulled through, thankfully, thank God, But I do feel that our children feel our support.
For sure.
They feel our support. So I do encourage a parent that is going through it and receiving a diagnosis, whether the child's in utero, whether the child is a couple months old, to just give them that support. Tell them that they're a rock star and that you're going to be there every step of the way for them. I feel like Aerilyn hears that, and she has us to back her up, and I think she feels it too. She feels it.
Before we wrap up, what do you hope someone listening might feel after this? What do you hope they get out of it? Anybody, not just somebody who has a child that might have a disability, but anybody listening.
I want to encourage everybody to. I hope that what they walk away with is some kind of just common ground, like in the struggle and in the sacrifice and pain. You're not alone in your darkest moments. You're just not, we all feel there's a point in our life, unfortunately, tragedy is going to touch all of us. at one point or another. And there's no escaping it, unfortunately, because we live in a broken world. And so what I want them to understand is that even at your lowest point, even at your darkest moment, I just reach out to someone, reach out to a group, reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, someone that you feel that they can listen to you and talk. Because I have a lot of parents that receive a really hard diagnosis. They keep it to themselves. They keep it close to their chest. And I feel that what that does is that puts too much pressure and stress on your soul. I have people that call me and say, hey, I got a hard diagnosis. I've been diagnosed with cancer. And we talk. And after our conversations, they walk away feeling lighter. I didn't change their diagnosis. They still have cancer, but the fact that they have something in common, which is struggle, or pain, it helps someone else. So if you're facing something difficult, reach out to me. Find me on Instagram. Call me.
I'm going to put the link to your daughter's Instagram page, but I will tell you, you are a bit of light in the world for people.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
It's great that I got to talk to you and you got to bring this message through. As we close today, I just want to remind everyone that your story reminds us that life doesn't always follow the path we imagine, but in the unexpected, you can find purpose, strength, and profound love, which is what you found. Your family went through uncertainty, and your decision to continue the pregnancy and the role of your faith that played along with that to speak to the kind of resilience you have, and that it's not always loud moments, but it's those steady, enduring moments that you have with your daughter. We can reflect on how we respond when life changes in an instant, and how we support others, and how we hold space for difficult decisions, and how we find meaning in the midst of it all. And you've given us some tips on how to do that. So your story is not just about hardship, it's about courage, it's about faith, and it's about extraordinary strength and the ability to keep moving on and finding your support in who you need to find your support in, God and others around you. So I want to say happy Mother's Day, not happy birthday, Mother's Day to a extraordinary mother. You make us other mothers look
Thank you. No, not at all. We all, my heart goes out to every mom because we all have the same heart for our children. We will sacrifice what it needs to sacrifice, and we love our children, and we suffer. As moms, we suffer. I think that's the common ground for all of us. And people try to say, oh, your suffering's up there. And I'm like, no. I have a teenager. I know what it is to have a normal level of suffering. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's being a mom is one of the most beautiful things in the world, but it's also the hardest. So
it is.
Yeah.
It is. Well, I think that you are an extraordinary mother, and you give us all a little example to live up to.
Thank
of
you.
strength and courage, and just a big heart that's willing to give and give, not just to your family, but you give to others too. So thank you again, and happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. You too. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you for joining me on Extraordinary People in an Ordinary World. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Please share with a friend. If you know an extraordinary person, I would love to hear from you so that I can feature them on the show. Please email me at bethextraordinarypeople@gmail.com, or you can message me on Instagram at extraordinary_people_podcast. I look forward to hearing from you. And in the words of Saint Mother Teresa, not all of us can do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. I look forward to our next extraordinary person, the first Friday of next month. See you then.